Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Class 47 Peter YouTube channel, and you're joining me today for another video on the new layout. This video is going to be a bit more exciting than the last one, because this is going to be the video where we start laying track. And also in this video I will be discussing and talking through the plans for this layout. Now, as you can see, there is some track that's been laid out on the baseboards. However, I should point out that this track is only on the layout as a guide, so that I know exactly where the track is going to go and what I'm going to be doing exactly in regards to the layout itself. Not just where the track needs to go, but what track I'm going to be using. The track I've got out here on the layout is the Hornby track, but none of this track is going to be used for this layout, which I'll discuss later. And also, none of the track is exactly laid out correctly as such, as you can see here, especially with that gap over there in that track. Especially here, as you can see, this curve here doesn't even line up with this one, but it's just giving me a rough idea on where the track is going to be going on this layout. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's going to be a lot easier for me, because I'm not going to go out and buy the track that I need in one go. I'm going to work my way around it, if you like, getting it bit by bit. Because the last thing I want to do is to rush out and buy lots of track because of all these ideas I've got, only to find later on they might not be able to work out. That's the last thing I want to do, because I don't want to start going down the road of making expensive mistakes. Now, when it comes to track laying, whether you're rebuilding a layout or you're just starting out building a layout, when it comes to planning out the track, you do need to take into account of space, of course. Now, I know that some people like to have several different running lines. 4 is the maximum. You know, I can understand that. Fair enough, you know, it's nice to have more than one line to run multiple different trains. And sure, in real life, if you know where to look, you will find areas on the network that has 4 lines. You've got, famously, the East Coast Main Line. There's the West Coast Main Line with the Trent Valley route. You've also got the Great Western Main Line. There's the Midland Main Line, and parts of the Southern Region area as well. However, not all of those areas on the network is all 4 lines. With the East Coast Main Line, it's not all 4 lines. There is some double track sections as well. It's the same story with the Midland Main Line. There are some double track sections, as is the case with the Great Western Main Line, the Southern Rail Network, and even the Trent Valley route, which is largely 4 lines. I know before and after Crewe there's a moment where it splits off into a junction and becomes double track. It becomes 4 lines again before it gets to Crewe station and afterwards, before it then largely becomes all double track. In fact, most of the UK rail network is double track. And as nice as it would be to go 4 lines on a layout like this, it would be very difficult to do. I don't think it would be very practical at all. If it could be done, then that means the plans I've got in mind for the layout likely wouldn't be able to be done. They'd be compromised. And I don't really want to do that. With the ideas that I've got in mind for the new layout, I want to do those ideas. I mean, at this stage you've still got to plan it out to see if they can definitely be done, which I think they can be, most of them at least. But this is the stage we're at, this is how you find things out. But I still want to at least try and do those ideas, and any other ideas perhaps that spring to mind. I don't want a layout that doesn't have any scenery or detail. I'd rather have as much scenery and detail as possible on the layout, because that's what I want. And if that means having fewer running lines, then so be it. I don't really mind at the end of the day, because like I say, most of the UK rail network is double track. And also going 4 lines as well would be more expensive. I'd have to buy another controller and more track. So for my layout, I'm going to take the easier way out and probably the cheaper way out. The main line is going to be mostly double track, and I say mostly because, well, you've already seen that one section earlier in the video, which I'll talk about more in just a second. But the main line is going to be mostly double track, but that not only gives me the room and space to still add scenery and detail, I can still have the 009, which I don't really want to get rid of. I want to keep the 009. If I had the space to do a second layout, I would do for the 009, but I don't really have that. So 009 and 00 gauge are to be, if you like, added together on one layout. And you know, that not only gives me 3 running lines in total, but that adds a bit of uniqueness to the layout, because you don't see 009 and 00 gauge together on model railway layouts very often. And, you know, it does give the impression there that you're seeing standard gauge and narrow gauge together on one layout. I know 00 gauge is a compromise in scale, but you still get the idea of what I'm trying to do there. And it's something different as well. Right, so a few days later we are now in the position where we can now start to lay track. So we've had a delivery come from Hatton's. You have to excuse the sound of the rain, because unfortunately it is raining outside and the weather today has not been very nice. So the first lot of the new track has come. As I said before, I'm not going to go out and buy all the track that we need all at once. So we're going to buy it in bits, if you like, because that way it'll just be more easier. Might also save a bit of postage as well and all that. So the track that we're going to be using and sticking with is going to be the Hornby track. So I'm sure some of you might be thinking at this point, well, why don't you go for something like Peco Code 75, because that's more realistic looking. Now, yes, I can vouch that, you know, Peco Code 75 track does indeed look more realistic looking compared to the Hornby stuff, but at the end of the day, the Hornby set track, you know, it's fairly robust and it does the job that you want it to do. And even if Peco Code 75 or whatever is a bit more realistic looking, it's still not exactly 100% accurate, because that track is still HO gauge. I think the most realistic track that you can buy is P4 and EM scales, I believe, but with that you have to convert your stock to run on that. I've got far too much stock to go over to that, so no thank you. So I prefer to just stick with 00 gauge. But to be quite honest, really, at the end of the day, you know, the Hornby track, it's not terrible by all means. You have to give it some respect. And it's not too expensive either. And you know, to be fair, it still looks like track, and I believe that once this has all been ballasted and even track weathered and whatever, I think it will look the part. And you know, if I'm going to put lots of all sorts of details and scenery on the layout to make that look as realistic as possible, I don't mind if the track is a compromise, because even if I went over to Peco Code 75 Streamline, you know, there's still going to be a compromise there because it's still HO gauge, even if it does look more realistic looking. So I'm perfectly happy to stick with the Hornby track. So first of all, we're going to make a start with the curves, which I think it probably seems easiest to start with when it comes to laying track, to start with the radius of curves first, because otherwise, if you just go ahead and lay every other track down, you know, you might find that perhaps there might be a bit of a problem. I just find it easier to start with the curves first so that we can get those right before then moving on to elsewhere on the layout. So that's the first track into place. It's not fixed down yet, but it shall be. But that's not going to be happening just yet. Now, for the radius of curves, for the inside line, the inner line, I suppose you could call it, we're using R609, radius 3, third radius. On the outside line, we're using R8262, radius 4, fourth radius curves basically. And I know on the previous lathe we used R607 and R609s like these, but we hadn't used R8262s previously. I think these might be the latest radius that Hornby have released actually. But the radius is similar, if not perhaps in the case of the R609s, exactly the same as what was used on the previous layout. And on the last layout I had, none of my big express locomotives had issues going around the curves, so hopefully there shouldn't be any issues here. There shouldn't, in theory, if they went round the curves on my last layout, and they should on this one. So all the track in this area has been laid. None of it is fixed down yet, and it won't be until I've got all the track laid. That's when I'll start fixing it down, because it will make things easier that way for me. Now basically, as you can see here, what's going on, the track layout is basically designed to mirror each other. So basically, obviously, that line there is mirroring the other one. Now the only thing was, after laying a couple of bits of track, particularly in these areas where it goes off into these adjacent lines, they weren't really mirroring these bits up here when they really should have been, because that meant that it was getting narrower coming down here, and it just didn't really look right, especially when we was trying to get it all level and straight. So we had to replace a couple of pieces. I've had to use a couple of bits of R6 100s for this piece here, for example. The curves that we used, they're the shortest ones that Hornby offer that has been cut up, and we've used them into basically two pieces from one curve. I can't remember the product code off the top of my head at the moment, but we've got two curves and basically cut them in half to make 4 in total, because we required 4 for obviously each end. Over on that side I've used a couple of pieces that are not R600s but are the same length, and by doing that it now looks much better. It now mirrors the other one, as it should do. Also, we have been getting the track nice and level and straight, which it is. If I just show you, by looking down it, you can see that's nice and level and straight, that is. And also, to make sure that the track has been level, in order to gauge how far as well the track's needed to be, we've used this, which is a lid that we've had, that we've kept files in from a box. But as you can see, it fits perfectly into the middle, and we've just been using that to run down the middle so that we can get the width right. So that's what's happening so far. This is how far we've got to. More track has been ordered, and I'm not going to keep stopping and starting the video saying, oh, this is what we've laid, we need to get some more track or whatever, because that's just going to get boring. So we've got more track to lay, so I've got to wait for that stuff to arrive, and then we can crack on with getting the rest of the track laid onto the layout. Right viewers, now we're now at the point where we can now start soldering the track up and getting it all wired up. Now this time around the track's going to be wired up this end of the layout, because down that end that's where the controller's going to be. So at this point, now that all the tracks all connected up together, this is now the point where before we even consider nailing it down or whatever, we have to get it wired up. So both lines have now been wired up. As you can see, the wires have not been wired to the outside of the lines, but they have been on previous layouts. They are now this time soldered underneath the track, as you can see. Obviously, if you look closely, you can see the wires just underneath the sleepers, but once we get round to ballasting, that will hide those wires. And I do think that that looks a lot better visually with the wires underneath the track than it does on the outsides of the rails at either end. So this is the controller. This is the Hornby HM2000. I've had this for some years now. It's given me strong and reliable service. Not had any issues with it, so I shall continue to use it. So as you can see, the wires are now wired up to the controller, and the controller is plugged in. You can see you've got the socket just there, the plug. That's a multi-socket as well, and you can see the wires underneath there, as you can see. And as for the controller itself, we've cut this bit of wood to size so that we can rest the controller onto this without having to put it on the baseboards, so that it gets in the way of any scenery or detail. And I've got room here for the controller that I used for the 009 stuff, so that'll be sorted out next. And so it's just been held in place with brackets and screws, this bit of wood has. And you know, it's pretty strong and sturdy, that is. It's not going to drop off or fall apart or anything like that. And it's not in the way of under here, so I can still get to my storage boxes, and I can still open the doors to this cupboard as well to access my locos. And there is power on the track as well, as we have tested that out, and it's all got to be tested out. So the next thing to do really is to get all the track nailed down. And just to show that there is power, as you can see there by those lights on the controller. So we're now in the position where we can start fixing the track down. So for this, do you glue the track down or do you pin it down? For this layout, I'm going to use a method that I've used in all my other previous layouts, and that's just pinning it down. So I've got this little hammer and this jar full of track pins ready. which the pins I've got in here are not too dissimilar from the ones that Hornby offer. You can even get track screws as well, from what I understand. I know some people might think that perhaps maybe gluing the track down is better than pinning it, because you won't see any nail heads, but to be honest really, I don't really mind that, because when I start doing all these running session videos again and whatever, you guys are not going to really be able to see the heads of the pins. And when I get round to track weathering, I think that will obscure the pin heads as well, so I don't think you're ever going to really notice them. Unless perhaps you've got absolutely brilliant and sharp eyesight. Also, something else to cover. Are you going to put cork underlay or any other sort of underlay under the track? We're just going to nail it straight to the baseboard. I can see why people do have underlay. It's either to do with the noise or even to get the ballast shoulder. Now I'm just going to nail the track straight to the baseboard and not use any underlay, because it's just spending more money on stuff that, to be honest, I don't really want to spend money on. I mean, personally I don't mind the noise, because let's face it, trains are noisy in real life, are they not? And personally, with the ballast shoulder, yes, it is a nice bit of detail to have, but as a rail enthusiast who goes out and film trains, whilst you will find the ballast shoulder out in real life, if you know where to look, there's plenty of places that you'll also come across it where you don't see the ballast shoulder. So to be honest really, I personally don't mind not having a ballast shoulder. That's something that I can probably live without, to be honest, on my layout, considering all the other plans and all the detail and scenery that I plan to put on it. I personally don't mind not having a ballast shoulder, but that's just me. That's just what I'm going to be doing with my layout. I haven't shown a montage pinning down all of the track, because I just thought that that might be boring. So I have done a lot of this off camera so that I could concentrate on it. But all the track has now been pinned down. None of the track has not been fixed down properly. It's all been fixed down correctly and properly as it should be. No loose bits of track anywhere, or track that hasn't been laid correctly, etc. It's all done now. I haven't done this over one day, I should stress. This has been done over at least 3 days, but I didn't want to just go at it constantly either. But it's now all done. I have also done some testing with it as well, and it's all working. But I'm not going to show anything running in this video. I will be saving that for the next video. So in the next one I'm just going to be showing on camera, you guys, that it all works. I have also been going around and filling in gaps in the track where there were sleepers missing or even broken. In the latest case, I think there was 1 or 2 pieces where I had a couple of broken sleepers. So I just took some old scrap bits of track and just cut some sleepers off and glued them into place. And that just not only makes it look better visually, but also more realistically. Because, you know, in real life you don't usually tend to see sleepers missing from bits of track that's been laid, or even so badly damaged that there's a whole chunk took out of it or whatever. So it does look a lot better when all the sleepers are in place. So that's something else I've been sorting out. One other thing that's had to be done, and this one is perhaps maybe something I didn't really want to do, but it's something that was essential. On this area here, where you can see these lines, I've had to put some packing underneath them. And there's a very good reason for that, and that is because, for whatever reason, the tracks seem to be dipping down. And basically what was happening was the track was just sagging down in the middle, where you got those 2 baseboards in the middle where they come together. I don't understand why that was the case, why those tracks were sagging in the middle because the baseboards are as flat as an ironing board and as flat as they can be. So I was quite baffled by that. Admittedly, you know, these frames, they could do with legs in the middle of them, which they don't have yet, but that shouldn't really be causing any sagging, which it isn't. So I'm not entirely sure what was going on there, but I have had to put some packing underneath the rails, because before it was very noticeable and it just looked ridiculous the way it was sagging. I've just got some bits of thin card, cut a few strips off and just shoved them underneath the track. And I'm just going to test this out now with this coach by just rolling it down the line. I mean, okay, there might perhaps be a very slight hump there in the track, but that's just very slight. And if there is a hump there, or a raise shall we say, it is only very slight. I would rather have a slight hump, because at the end of the day you're not always going to get the track perfectly flat and even. There will be some uneven areas, but I would rather have a little bit of a hump than an area where the track is sagging. Because, like I say, before I even put some packing under it just looked very noticeable and very ridiculous. If I was to put platforms in this area, no chance. I just wouldn't be happy with that. I just couldn't live with it. And it would just stand out like a sore thumb and would be very noticeable, and I think it would ruin the illusion on the layout. So that, in my opinion, is now looking a lot better than what it was before. So now that we've got all of the 00 gauge track laid, we're still not quite finished, because now we need to start laying down the 009 track. And so just arrived in the post, we have some 009 rails. Now on the previous layout, the stuff I used was their set track. Now I have still got that track, but this time, the track that I've gone for is in fact their Code 80 Streamline track, which I didn't know about that they had until recently. And this is their flexible track. This is their mainline narrow gauge track. You can also get some flexible narrow gauge stuff that also has the worn railway sleepers as well. But I didn't want to go for those. I wanted to go for the mainline ones, where the sleepers are undamaged basically. And also, I have gone out and bought, when I bought the track, a couple of packs of rail joiners for both N-gauge and 009 track, because I figured I would be needing some of these, because the track that I've got here doesn't come with sleepers, well, fish plates, sorry, should I say, pre-fitted. So I'm looking forward to getting this track down. It has taken a few days for it to get here, because for some reason, on the week that I bought it, which was getting on towards the weekend, it didn't arrive until the following week, when I'm filming this clip on the Wednesday. There had been a delay for some reason. It got to Birmingham at the facility where they deliver all the parcels and that to get to my area, but then it ended up back in Merseyside somehow, according to the tracking when I was looking at it, so I don't quite understand what happened there. But the stuff's here now, so now I can actually make a start on getting the rest of this track laid. I haven't bought all of the 009 track that I'm going to need for the 009 part of the layout, of course. I've got 10 lengths of this stuff, which this is in, I believe it's a yard, and I have to say, somehow it seems to look longer than what it did on the photographs, but there we go. So the reason I've acquired the Streamline narrow gauge track is all going to become clear when we start laying the track now. So all of the 009 track has now been laid. This all wasn't done in one day, this was done in over, I think it must have been a week or two. Because like with the 00 track, I didn't go and buy all this track that I needed in one go. Some might say I probably should have, because it probably would have sped up the process a bit. But yeah, that way I'd rather do that, so that way I don't overspend and end up buying bits that I don't really need and having a use for. So much of the track that I've used on the layout for the narrow gauge railway is the flexible track that I bought, but I have used some set track pieces as well in some areas. And that's most notably really for the ends of the layout, the curves in particular. That includes this end here and this end down here, although that bit that you see going down in the middle and some of that curve there is flexible track, but the rest of the curves are the set track stuff. And that was really a compromise, because I did try to use the flexible track for those end sections, but it just wasn't really working out, so I had to go with the set track. And the track is wired up as well, as you can see there. I didn't film that on camera because it's exactly the same method that we've done for the 00 gauge track, so I decided not to film wiring up the 009 track. But it is all wired up now, and it all works. And over there you can see we have the Gauge Master Combi controller there. That's now fixed down onto that bit of wood there, next to the HM2000 that I used for the 00 stuff. And I've tested this and it is all working, most of it is at least. There has been a couple of little things that have had to be ironed out, but you know, that's why we do testing. So it is all working, but I'm not going to show anything running in this video. I'm going to save that for the next video, because in the next one I'm going to show you all that it all does work. I mean, there will be the odd review video cropping up here and there probably before the next one gets uploaded. I know there will be one coming out, but regardless, I'm still going to include that into the next video anyway that I do for the new layout, just to show you all these all does work. The only bit that doesn't seem to be working for some reason are these sidings here. For some reason there's no power on them, it's dead. I can't really understand why, because it works everywhere else except for here. So what we're going to have to do is to get a switch and fix it up where the controllers are and run a wire down to here. So it sort of, I think it feeds the power from one line to the other basically, you know what I mean. I'm not going to put that in for this video though, that'll be something for the next one. But that is going to be taken care of and it will be sorted by then. And we've already gone out and bought a switch for us, and we've already got wire. And I think we've got some trunking as well, because we're going to have to feed some down underneath the layout, rather than just having loose wires exposed. So this will all be sorted. I know that these tracks are looking rather close to here, on the end of the boards, but what I've got in mind, at least one of the tracks will have a buffer stop there. I will be discussing more about that in a minute. So the reason why I went out and bought the flexible track in the first place is because I didn't want it all looking straight like you see it on the 00 gauge track. With that I'm fine, but I didn't want it to be the same for the 009 layout, because I just think it would look boring then. So that is why I've made it, if you like, sort of wibbly wobbly. I know it might look odd as you look at it now, because there's no scenery or detail, but once that has gone on, you know, it will look quite cool. And the reason I've done this is because it makes the layout more fun and adds a bit more interest. Originally I was going to have a nice long sweeping curve going all the way down, from there down to here, but that wasn't going to happen, taking into the account of the length of the baseboards and the frames of course. But in order so that I can still have the track so it's not all nice and straight, that's why I've made it the way it is. To have all these sweeping curves, as you can see. And I think that does look really interesting. Of course it will look even better once we've got scenery down. I've also added a passing loop onto the narrow gauge railway, and that gives me more play value with the 009, so that way I can actually run more than one train. Right, so now that we're at the stage where all the track has been laid, it's all wired up and it all works, I'm now in the position where I now can start revealing the plans for the new layout, because I'm sure you're all curious and dying to know what I'm going to be doing for this layout. So to finish off this video, I'm going to be discussing what's planned for this layout. So we're going to start off with this section here, which to be honest I don't think really needs much discussion, because I'm sure you've all probably caught on already what's going to be going there. But that's where the station's going to be. It is going to be a much bigger station compared to any of my previous layouts, and I have always wanted to try and do some form of large station, and so that's now going to be happening. The platforms are going to be both the same length this time, and they're much longer. On the previous layout, the platforms weren't even all the same length. In real life you do sometimes come across some platforms that aren't the same length as the other one, but on the previous layout it just didn't look right, especially for what was supposed to be a fairly large station. And also really the platforms themselves weren't really ideal, nor were they very practical, because you could only really get at the most squeeze I think 3 coaches onto the platforms, maybe 4. Running large trains, you know, just wasn't really going to work out right, because it would mean half the train wouldn't even fit in the platforms. With this layout I can fit I think a 6-7 coach train, probably an 8 one at a push. If it means you get 1 or 2 coaches hanging over off the platforms, that doesn't matter, because I have seen that in real life, where you do come across some places where I have seen 1 or 2 coaches that are overhanging the platform, if you like. But to have half the train doing that, it just does not look right. I've never come across that myself. The platforms, they're going to be made from scratch. The plan is to use 18mm wood strips, probably MDF. I've yet to go out and get those. If I can't find wood strips, I may have to get a baseboard and trim that to length. And the platforms are all going to be detailed up. I've taken inspiration from Everard Junction. I'm going to make the platforms look aged and used and abused, like they've been stood around for years. I'm going to be adding brickwork detail, weathering that up, paving slabs, tarmac look, and all sorts of other bits of details to make them look ultra realistic. And you can expect to see some other bits of details on there. There will be some platform lighting, there'll be benches, maybe a couple of waiting rooms and a couple of other few bits and bobs. And so that will look great when it's all done. And of course, you shall be seeing videos on all these, by the way. So everything that I do will be covered in a video. There'll be nothing getting left out. And you'll also notice that with this station, there's 2 adjacent lines on either side. I've ditched the bay platforms, which I had on the previous layout, because with those I found you could only really fit a 2 coach train in them. With these adjacent lines it gives me a lot more flexibility. I can still run my DMUs, I can run a 4-car DMU, like for example a 158 and 156 combination. I can also run my auto and push-pull trains, local trains, perhaps maybe the occasional enthusiast special, perhaps. And also freight traffic as well, which will mostly be running on the adjacent lines. That's not to say on the odd occasion I couldn't have them routed through on, I suppose you could call them the main lines themselves, the fast lines, because if you go somewhere where there's 4 lines, you know, you usually have the slow line for the freight, but sometimes on the odd occasion you do see them run on the fast line, so I could do something like that. But also with these adjacent platforms, given how long they am, I can also halt freight trains in them. For example, a Class 56 on the HAAs, and I did try this out actually prior to getting all the track set up. And that should make a very good scenario. So for example, it's either stopped to have a crew change, or it's had to stop at a signal to allow, let's say, a high-speed train on an express service, or a Class 47 on a cross-country service, whatever, and then after that it gets routed on its way again, and that should give me a bit more play value for the layout, and also add more interest as well and variety. Now for across here, going all the way down along there, is planned to have some sort of structure, some sort of road over structure, going all the way along there. That'll all get detailed up and up realistic. I have the idea of how to make it. Going on top of there, of course, there will be a station building, which I already have, but you're not going to see that yet. And it has to go up there because there isn't any room to fit it on the station. Well, not that it's necessarily enough room, just that I can't fit it on there anyway, for obvious reasons. Of course, I'll have to be a footbridge as well, going from that down to the platforms. Now, with the footbridge, I'm in two minds of which idea to go for. Either having a custom made one, or perhaps getting, I think it's one of those Fala kits. They're basically plastic kits. I know I've seen a couple of people have them on their British layouts, and they do fit in really well. So I haven't quite decided what sort of footbridge I'm going to go for, either a custom made one or one that's a kit. But either way, that's what's planned for that, and that should look quite fancy. And obviously the structure itself will have to be made to a certain height so that electric locomotives with the pantographs raised can actually run under it. Especially the Class 76, because the pantographs on that, I think, are at the highest height as opposed to all the others. Of course there'll be lower leaf buildings going along the back, and then there will be a bridge as well going across somewhere like there. I've got some bridge sides already lying around that I can use, I think. I already have the ideas on how to make the roads and the pavements to make those look very realistic. I've just got to finalise those ideas. There will be some street lighting as well. Haven't decided if the buildings are going to have any lighting, we'll see. Of course there'll be figures and there'll be road vehicles as well and other bits of detail. Although with the road vehicles I'm going to try not have the road completely cluttered up, because I want to be able to see some of that realistic road detail. There'll be things like walls and fences as well, you get the idea. And also, I should be able to hopefully have a station car park of some form next to the station building, perhaps maybe squeeze in a tyre and exhaust repair centre. Maybe have like a footpath that's look like it's being uncared for and used and abused, etc. Maybe a couple of houses as well with gardens. Now for this end of the layout, there will be some form of brick wall corresponding to the structure itself going along here. I was thinking originally of having something in like retaining walls, but I think going along there it might not look right. I don't know, we'll see. But obviously I need to make it so that those are not fixed in permanently. I think it'll probably most likely be a brick wall, the same as how I'm going to do it for the rest of that particular structure, where it's going to be like a high street, if you can call it, running down along here, so it blends in a bit more. But obviously those walls I probably won't have them fixed in permanently. I have to think of a way so that I can remove them so I can get to this bit of track here, because I might need to clean it at some point. I will add some retaining walls though going down along the ends here. I'm thinking of buying the Hornby Scaldale ones because they look really good. And then for this it's planned to have some sort of garden. Basically, if you've ever been to Sydney Gardens, then you'll get the idea of what I'm trying to go for. There'll be some sort of wall going across there, and then all this here, well, I say all of it, much of it at least, will have some nice scenery there, grasses, couple of trees, maybe a few shrubs. Who knows, a couple of flowers even. I was hoping to get some detail along here, but as you can see, due to these lines here, I think you can only, at the most, just get a wall in there. So I might, possibly, look at seeing if I can maybe add some sort of extension on here. Just a small bit of wood, so I can fit in maybe some more scenery on, detail and whatever, just so I can have something here. But we'll see what happens with that. But that's the plan. So you get the idea with that. And so that should look really, really good when that's done. So there's not going to be a tunnel on this layout this time. I've decided to not have one of those and go for something different. For the narrow gauge railway, it's planned to have it obscured from view from the double gauge railway. So running across here, separating it, it's either going to be retaining walls from the Batman narrow gauge range or some other form of landscaping. And of course along here you can expect to see stuff like static grass and maybe a couple of other bits of details like flowers. So that'll look really nice. Then going all the way down this area, on the walls of the garage there will be back scenes. And this time, adding any scenery there, you don't have that ruddy post going down the middle. So any detail added there, the post will be behind it and it won't be smack bang in the middle like it was in the previous layout. But for where the back scenes are going to go, I will get a piece of back scene to cut across and glue it into place where that post is to obscure it even more. Going down along there, all the way along here, I'm going to be having a row of retaining walls. So that will be a really great bit of detail to have, weather them up and have them look like they've been stood around for years. I might even decide to add in a couple of them low relief factories as well. So that's going to make a great bit of detail to have. I will be having some signals in as well this time, because the previous layout was devoid of them, mostly. I will be going for working signals, such as the ones you see today, the more modern ones, but I haven't decided which manufacturer to go for yet. I've got a signal box, so I will add that in somewhere. And you can expect to see other bits of details as well, such as cable trunking, line side cabinets, and obviously all the cables that you see going under the lines, etc. Where the sidings are on the narrow gauge railway is here. This is going to be an engine shed. This is going to be the only engine shed that will appear on the layout due to space. Obviously these lines aren't working yet, but by the next video that should be sorted. So the plan is for this, I'm most likely looking at getting the Batman Syncraft narrow gauge shed. So then you've got this line that can run next to it. Or I might decide to scratch build my own shed. Either of the two. And that'll get detailed up and it'll look really nice. Have a water tower there as well. Going here, there'll be some sort of scenery. Going along here, running up the front of there, I might put some rock faces. This scenery here is going to be landscaped. So that'll look really nice. It's all got static grass on it and etc. And obviously there'll be detail going here, some more static grass, add a few shrubs and stuff like that. And then going along this area here, it's planned to have a static caravan park. Going along the back there, I will get a back scene, probably get someone to make one for me. Or maybe seeing if there's a manufacturer out there that has a suitable back scene that I can use for that area. And so of course there'll be static grass. The caravans I'm going to go for, there'll be 3D printed ones you can get off the internet. I'll be going for the ones that have the balconies basically. I have been to quite a few static caravan parks. Last year we went to the Isle of Wight for a holiday. And we went to the caravan park that's in near Cowes. And the static caravan that we stayed in, it was absolutely amazing. And the view we had as well was just spectacular. So I'll get static caravans along there and obviously in that area there. They have to go there because I can't really get them in the middle. So I'll have to think of something to add in the middle of there and try and be ingenious. Unless I could perhaps maybe add something along there to extend that, so maybe I could possibly squeeze them in, but I doubt it. I doubt I'll be able to squeeze them in onto there, so I'll have to go on the ends, but that doesn't matter. Where there's a will, there's a way. And obviously I'll get pavements put in, perhaps a few picnic benches, gas bottles, etc. You name it. So that's going to look quite something when that's done. And so just thought that it would be quite appropriate to have a static caravan park. I've been to quite a few and I do really like going to them when we have holidays. You know, I've always enjoyed that, especially the holiday we had last year, so got to have a static caravan park. Now where you have the passing loop on the narrow gauge railway, this is where the station's going to be. The idea with this station is I wanted it to be somewhere sort of out in the sticks a bit, if you get the idea. Basically with the station I've took inspiration from Hornby Magazine's A Fairly Good Idea. So the platforms are quite long, so I can get in a 6-coach train, hopefully 3 bogie coaches and 3 bug boxes, plus something like a double fairly. Like I've said before, the passing loop will add more play value to the 009. So the platforms I'm going to be thinking of looking at something like some sort of tarmac or something like the Geoscenics pothole road or something. There will be working lighting going on there, fencing, probably a few flowers, telephone box, one of those old wooden toilet hut things, a few people, you get the idea. And so that will look quite something I think when that's done. And then, going all along here, again, the narrow gauge railway will be obscured from the view of the 00 gauge line. So I'm thinking of landscaping that area, possibly getting just some polystyrene piece and trying to landscape it myself to look like rock faces. Or I could just go out and buy my own rock faces. And then it is planned for all this area to be landscaped of some form. Of course here you can expect to see some detail. I might even landscape this bit as well, possibly. We'll see how that goes. And so there will be a bit of landscaping of some form, I'm sure, going along here. And so I think that will look really stunning when that's done. That's not to say necessarily in the future I couldn't rip it out and maybe add a few sidings in. But then the only thing is there, it will make obscuring the 00 gauge harder to obscure it from that of the narrow gauge line, which is what I want to do with this layout. But we'll see what the future brings. But that's the plan, to have this landscape of some form. Like I said, potentially having my own rock faces, like having some sort of rock cliff or something, carved out of polystyrene, or finding my own rock faces. I know Woodland Scenics do the rock faces, so I could just get some of those and just add them in and then landscape it my way, which is what I did on the old layout, you'll remember, with the cutting. So I could do something like that, if you get the idea. And then going along the back there, there's going to be some other form of landscaping, possibly going along there. I mean, I haven't fully decided that yet. I might later on, prior to coming to that area, decide to change it for something else. And there will be some back scenes going across there, so you don't see everything that's in the background. But those are the plans. Some of them I'm still finalising, but most of them are set in stone, and that's what I want to do. And when it's all done, this lake will look fantastic. It will look quite something. I'm looking forward to getting it all done, and when it is done, like I say, it will be something quite special. And it will just look absolutely fantastic and realistic when it is all finished. So that's it for this video. Everything that I wanted to cover for this video has been covered. All the track is laid down. It's all wired up and now all working. I've discussed the plans for the layout. I know some of them I'm still fully deciding on whether I'm going to do them or not, but most of them I've decided that's what I'm going to do. So that's really it for this video. In the next one I will be showing you that all this layout does work. And then from there we can start on ballasting, adding a couple of other bits of details, track weathering, and then from there we can really start to go on with the scenery in detail, station platforms, etc. But that's all to come in future videos. So I'll leave you now for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, please do. Drop me a like, and feel free to post a comment, always appreciated. And while you're at it, why not check out some of the other videos I got on the channel. So until next time, I hope you enjoy this video, and take care. Ta-ra.